Xavier University of Louisiana is located in the dynamic city of New Orleans. New Orleans is a cultural epicenter of delicious food, eclectic live music and dance, and friendly and unique people. Xavier's location provides students with an exemplary liberal arts education, while also providing a unique college experience. A long-standing tradition of Xavier is to graduate our majority Black student body with degrees in biomedical fields. Our students are prepared to leave ready to serve and lead not only the surrounding New Orleans community, but the larger global society as well.
Finished yet.
ZenVStyle.com. 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 ZenVStyle.com.
its foundation and their mission statement. They're very supportive, and the people here are amazing, and they want you to succeed academically and professionally.
Xavier is a school of excellence. Xavier builds leaders. And not only that, Xavier builds well-rounded leaders.
Everyone here is trying to be the best that they can, and that's why they came to Xavier.
It's not too big, it's not too small. I don't need a bus to get to the other side of campus, which I knew I wasn't gonna work well with.
This school is great because it's placed in New Orleans, which is a huge melting pot in itself. And Xavier really prides himself on community and community service, so we're often going out into the community. So we see people of all races, we see people of all social classes.
The one thing that really brought me to this university was the family atmosphere.
We're a family here, we're community. You find your closest friends, and most importantly, Xavier helps you find yourself.
So it would be an opportunity not only for you to get a great academic ground in a school that's actually quite rigorous and quite prestigious, and then still have fun in the city of New Orleans.
Viewers, welcome to the Black Agenda Podcast. I'm your co-host, Adrian Guest, along with co-host Devin Dito. Today, we are continuing our HBCU Awareness Series, yet again, bringing you another great institution, Xavier University of Louisiana, and their president, Dr. Reynolds Barrett. Just to give you a little bit of information about Dr. Barrett, he's actually the 6th president and the 2nd lay leader of Xavier University of Louisiana, which is the only Catholic HBCU in the nation. So that's a really, really interesting point there. Before being president, Dr. Barrett served as provost at Savannah State University and at Wilkes University. As chief academic officer at Savannah, he led the university initiatives to build enrollment, enhance the quality and diversity of academic programs, develop the faculty, promote interdisciplinary efforts, especially between the humanities and sciences, and to create cooperative relationships with neighboring institutions and with other partners at the K-12 and higher education levels. Dr. Barrett is a Haitian native who received his undergraduate degree cum laude in biochemistry from Columbia University and a PhD in biochemistry from MIT in the laboratory of the late Harbourgen Coran. Beyond his degrees, he has a postdoctoral experience as a fellow at the Howard Hughes Institute for Immunology at Yale and the Center for Cancer Research at MIT, where he completed research regarding immunology. He has served on many professional organizations and advisory bodies, including those of the National Institutes of Health, the board of the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, and the Georgia Coastal Indicators Coalition. He has received awards and fellowships for teaching and scholarship. So viewers, we always like to say this, but we've got great individuals at the helm of our HBCUs. So again, we're bringing you another great leader, and we're so pleased to have you join us today, Dr. Barrett.
Good to be with you and to join the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a great conversation so far as we've been doing this, because the thing that we've realized is that HBCUs do not get the appreciation they deserve. So that's why we wanted to do this. March is HBCU Awareness Month. So we really wanted to put on something that talks about the value of HBCUs, which is what the first segment is about. It's about the history and the value of HBCUs. And one of the things that we've gathered throughout this series is that HBCUs do more than just educating. HBCUs are about giving back to their students, giving back to the communities, making sure that they can, leave a legacy behind. Even with your institution, Mother Catherine was clear in laying out the purpose of Xavier University She wanted to produce leaders for society, for government, for the church, with a strong emphasis on giving back with the sense of stewardship or sharing that they freely receive. And one of the things that we wanted to kind of, get in with the first question, we've been talking about how this mantra of, giving back as you freely receive isn't something that we see within the Black community as a whole. So our first question, how are you getting your students and faculty and staff at Xavier to live up to that mission? And what can we do to really expand that throughout our Black neighborhoods?
I think one of the things that we have as a core sense of what Xavier is, which has been here before me, we have lived this since our founding in the early 1900s, is the expectation of service. When we have a mission statement, which eventually has been modified slightly but never changed, says we are here to contribute to a more just and humane society. That notion of service, if I put it this way, is that our students, our graduates understand that no matter what they've learned here, whether it's chemistry, it's history, it's art, it's political science, that none of that will have any meaning until they put it to the service of somebody else. That's really when you come to use it to build community, to serve other people as a physician, as a teacher, as a lawyer, whatever you do. It means that notion of service is really built in. And that notion is that basically giving and living for someone else is important to what we do. That's what community is, that none of us walks alone and none of what we do has any meaning by itself, for us alone. And that notion reminds our alumni that giving back, even if they're giving back elsewhere, is important. That's important that they are giving and always building, and that's what they are called to be. And I think that's also very inherent in the cultures of ancestors. There are many expressions, for example, in the Caribbean when they speak of kombit, or other efforts which essentially build the coming together to do something great. That expectation of community was inherently there. And it almost counters another American tension. Americans are known for their individualism. And the individualism is that, and sometimes taken to an extreme pole. And the other extreme pole is communitarian values, right? And that's the communitarian values is never lost at our institutions. And I have to say that in this COVID pandemic, right, it's communitarian values that saved us, not individualism.
Very true. Very, very true. And one thing we've noticed too, speaking with, presidents from all around the country, is that each HBCU is kind of doing its part in the community, really during this pandemic, to try to help out and try to, kind of blunt the blow of this pandemic when it comes to our community. We talked to Howard, they're giving vaccines. I think even FAMU is doing that. So you definitely do see each university kind of trying to do its own thing in the community. And so our question is more so about you a little bit and your journey. We know you went to Columbia and MIT. And so we just wanted to ask you, what was your perception, of HBCUs and how, just kind of walk us through your higher education journey and your perception of those HBCUs and what did you think of their value? Well,
to begin with, I grew up in Brooklyn, and the high school that I attended, I'm a member of the last class of that high school. The building the building of that high school became Medgar Evers College. Not historically Black college, but also recent. So I've also known Medgar Evers College from my days as I was leaving my high school and I came back to the neighborhood. But also, more tellingly, is that even when I was at MIT, John Turner, who was an associate dean, myself, Joe Francisco was a professor at Penn. He and I, were graduate students and postdocs, just finishing. And we began the program basically of recruiting students from HBCUs to a summer program. And many of those students then went on to become graduate students. Some of them are professors elsewhere. Some of them have even gray hair at this point. But the sense that these brilliant young men and women were coming from HBCUs was not strange to us, that even some of my professors themselves had studied at HBCUs. John Turner himself is a Fisk graduate, and he was associate dean of the graduate school. So we had examples of people from HBCUs who had done remarkable things. So when my coming to Xavier was not my first venture in HBCU, because I was at Savannah State. But before that, as a professor of chemistry, I was professor at Clark Atlanta. So where we could see what could happen at HBCUs with great students. So it was not, to me, a recent revelation. of what the HBCUs were doing. But also you saw the examples of who came out of the HBCUs and what they were doing, and they were throughout the country. So there was never a question in my mind that the education and the talent in those HBCUs wasn't as rich as what I would see, for example, in many of the institutions in the Northeast where there are very few HBCUs.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's what we've been seeing from a lot of our leaders is that, even from people who may not have gone to an HBCU institution, they understand the value. They have colleagues, they have family members who've participated in that, and they've been able to see that HBCUs are putting on some top programs, whether it be in engineering, medicine, different things of that nature. We know that even Xavier is putting on a lot of the top programs in a lot of these fields. So yeah, that's why, Dr. Bear, we really like to start this first segment, or rather the conversation, talking about the history and the value of HBCUs, because they have a special place in our society, special place in Black communities, and they deserve, to be recognized. So with that being said, we're going to take our first break, viewers, and when we come back, we're going to get into our second segment, which has been talking about the societal perception of HBCUs. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Xavier was something different. It was the experience that you needed with the challenge that you wanted. It's how you leave ready.
I guess I was destined to go to Xavier. They really do help us for the real world.
The network of Black physicians that Xavier has is tremendous.
They're not just focused on the now, they're focused on the now and the future.
25 years later, I graduated from the same pharmacy school that my father graduated from.
That's the best decision in my life I could have made.
All right, viewers, let's get back into this. We're in our second segment. Remember, we're joined today by Dr. Baird, who's the sixth president of Xavier University of Louisiana, a great institution, only Catholic HBCU in our nation. Dr. Baird, we've been talking a lot about societal perception in our second segment within our HBCU series. And I wanted to start off by just giving a little bit of praise to your institution, because there was a couple different things I saw on the website. One was there was an announcement by TikTok that you're going to be getting a $1 million donation from them in recognition for serving underrepresented students with programs focused on public health and professions. Another thing is NBC Universal News Group is launching a new program, journalism training program with you all, that's going to be really a world-class organization program for you, that's going to show that people that are like NBC see value in HBCUs and Xavier. Not to mention looking at rankings. I mean, you're number 3rd on the U.S. News Best College Guide 2021 when it comes to HBCUs. So clearly, Xavier is, y'all excelling, y'all are doing some great things. But from talking with all of our HBCU leaders, we know that y'all are doing these great things, even with challenges that are happening behind the scenes. One of those big challenges is that y'all are fighting against a societal perception that wants to keep minority groups as the inferior groups, wants to keep them down. Because when you look at that, when you look at that fact like that, HBCUs are often top of the list, but only under certain categories, like looking at HBCUs or looking at regional schools in the South. So our question to you, Dr. Vera, as a disclaimer, we know rankings are not important, but for a lot of students and a lot of parents, they are. So how do we fix this narrative, or maybe reevaluate the metrics that go into these rankings lists, so that our nation's HBCUs can receive the appreciation and the acceptance that they deserve?
Well, I'll begin with one data point. Xavier sends more African Americans to become physicians than any school in the country. We've not been doing it for the last few years. We've been doing it for many decades, because we're very intentional about that. I would put this: whether any student who comes here, whether that student is Black, white, or of any other ethnicity, and comes to Xavier with the desire of coming to medical school, or goes to another one of those very good peer schools of ours, and I can mention a few in Pennsylvania and in Massachusetts as well, right? Coming to Xavier or coming to one of those schools and with the desire of coming to medical school, there's no doubt that the probability of you reaching that dream is much greater at Xavier. We've been doing it very well. In fact, many other institutions come to look to see exactly why and how we're doing it, especially since we do not presume to be a selective institution. We bring in students and I'm very intentional. This is my choice of words. I said, we're bringing young people who may not have received the education they deserved. We're not blaming the student. Remember, no child chooses his or her own school, at least not yet. And we do these marvelous things with it because of a faculty that's very intentional and that we reproduces itself. People leave it, we replace with faculty of those qualities still. That's and Xavier, the fact that we send these students to become doctors, PhDs in the physical and life sciences, and the NSF points that out, is because of not something that we do that's uniquely just for African American students. Because the education is at the highest quality. In fact, one thing that students coming to Xavier face is that, as I say, they may have chinks in their armor because you may come with an education that is not perfect, but you will discover the chinks in your armor in that first year. And the one thing these alumni say, they know the faculty has their back, so that the faculty says, "Here's what you don't know, and now here's how we're going to work to fix it with you." And the students know this. We're very intentional about that, and our students can stand and compete with anyone around the country, around the world. It's happened, and we've done it, and we know how to do it well. Part of it is believing that there is talent in these students. And now, to come back to your question, that the assumption that there was less intellectual capacity, that Black descendants of slaves should not be educated at the higher levels, that they should be educated for only menial tasks, was because it was important for the society to say, we need these people in their place in order to keep a certain caste structure based on race. That was also the justification, for example, why you would enslave someone and expropriate his or her labor, children, body, and to rationalize that. And as I say, there's something that someone always says, even the military knows that when someone does great violence, even in a righteous cause, right? You need to process that so that you can sleep and not become a monster. The rationalization structure was to allow these people who were inflicting this violence in order to actually go to sleep and actually hold their children after having flogged a woman and taken the skin off her back. So that structure of minimizing things Black also extended to institutions of education institutions. So that you'd have schools like that school, which was not very big at the time in Atlanta, Morehouse or Spelman or Xavier. You have these remarkable young women and men who are graduating from there, right? Mm-hmm. And somehow people assume that they were getting less than until they sat in the bench next to you in medical school, law school, whatever. And say, oh, Howard. You have these remarkable, but there's always a surprise. My God, you went to this HBCU? No, you should see the others who were next to me. They were even brighter than I was. But that reluctance to see this reality when the reality faces you is what I call the American mind. The American mind is, if you think about it, you think that we all swim in this water and we drink all the same Kool-Aid and we get infected by it. The American mind is that when you wake up and something happens, even when you're 7 or 8 years old, and the first question is, was he Black or was he white? That's an automatic question. Mm-hmm. It's a question that we ask ourselves. For example, if I hear a voice of someone on the phone and the voice is ambiguous, it could be a woman or a man in between. My brain wants to know if it's a woman or a man because it's something I was coded from since I was a little child, a little baby. Even if the person is just telling me your car's about to be towed, the sex difference doesn't matter, right? My brain wants to know. The same way that in the United States, the way we create a society that actually washes people's minds, right? That everyone wants to know, was he Black or white? That's an automatic question. Well, and as Americans, because we are the empire, we are the great power of the world, right? We assume everyone thinks the way we do. Until you get to maybe Saudi Arabia, where the question would be, is he Sunni or Shiite? But not Black or white. Not everybody thinks the way you do. And you realize that even an immigrant who comes here, even as an adult, after several years in the United States, begins to think like an American. But the assumption that the fact that people come to think that way is basically understand that basically we can actually liberate ourselves from that kind of thinking.
Exactly.
It's not an obligatory fact.
Mm-hmm.
But we're swimming in this water and drinking the Kool-Aid, and the Kool-Aid is affecting everyone, right? And I even use the fact that even Black folk get affected by it as well, because there's a very simple study which was done of the pain relief by physicians of patients with certain greater levels of pain. And they noticed in that large study, which was quite tens of thousands of patients, right? So it was a large study. They could see that Black patients, their pain was addressed less aggressively than white patients, which may have protected Black folks from the opium crisis, if you think about it. But what they did, when you looked at that data and pulled out the African-American physicians in that set, right? They too undertreated the pain of Black folks. Because there are certain assumptions about Black folks that we drink the Kool-Aid.
Too many times, too often.
It's more like we're swimming in the ocean and everyone's in that water. And you don't notice the water anymore because the water is like the air around us. And that notion, that instant attitude minimizing things that were built by the descendants of slaves, right, doesn't benefit us because these institutions are a rich repository, not just of the legacy of slaves, of the descendants of slaves, right, but there's a reservoir of talent that's so rich here. And when you come on my campus and you see, I call them these freakily bright young women and men walking around, they've always been there.
Right. And it's so interesting hearing you explain the thought process of how we got to where HBCUs, and like you say, anything Black is perceived as being less than or, not up to standard or something to that effect. Although the data doesn't, represent that, people will believe it no matter what. It's almost perception is reality for a lot of people, even though the facts don't back that up. And one of the things we always ask each president is just kind of, what their university is doing to counteract these narratives out there. We know that we've talked to some schools like Fisk University who's made it a point. They are laser focused on making sure that their story is told, by them. And so they're going out and making sure they're putting stories in newspapers and magazines. They're getting in front of kids in high schools to make sure the story is told correctly, because typically in the media, the national media, they'll rather tell the negative story about an HBCU than tell the story of how many doctors and lawyers and physicians they're producing every year. They'll rather tell the negative story. And so we just want to ask, what is, I guess, Xavier, what are your goals and what are you doing to make sure that the story of Xavier University of Louisiana is told correctly and trying to counteract that narrative that, HBCUs are less than?
Well, I think we are very intentional in telling our story, the story of our graduates, and what happens at Xavier. And Reggie, for example, is one of the individuals in our communications program which makes sure that our story is told, and that we are owning our story. Because the assumption that you're quite right, the assumption is that others will tell our story correctly can fail us often enough. The other role that we do, I think, we see ourselves as an education as an institution of higher learning. We are in the business of truth telling, because we are, to use a very New Orleans metaphor of the neutral ground, we are as a center to give the objective truth and explain the truth to everyone. So even our forums that we have forums and different seminars otherwise, we make them available to the public. For example, our Center for Equity, Justice, and Human Spirit is what I call our outward-facing mission. There's an inward mission educating our young people. There's an outward mission where basically we are making sure that the research and scholarship and the encounters that we bring guests onto our campus to be able to analyze and reflect on our story, and to be involved in some of the debates that are truly contentious points. As I say, the neutral ground at Xavier is where those two communities that didn't like each other, right, would come on the neutral ground sometimes for carnival, even for picnic or for a ball game. So this is where actually we have encounters with people who even do not agree with each other, and that's that modeling discussions, but also discussions based on facts, on truth, not on make believe. is important. So that truth telling, we feel that it is our mission. Our mission is not just to our students, we have an external mission to the world.
Right. And that's what, that's why we did this series. We wanted to give you all, the ability to tell the story through your voice and with facts to back it up. That way, you can't really dispute it. Once you ask people like, why do you think HBCUs aren't up to snuff? They really don't have a great answer. They say, well, I think this, I think that. And then you say, well, the numbers don't back that up. So they can't really, retort and say anything. So that's why we need more, universities to be laser focused like Xavier and others, to tell that story and be intentional about what you're saying.
I can give you an example of how remarkable the people who are here, faculty, staff, even in my cabinet. Think about the pandemic. January of last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
People were still not guessing whether this thing was real or not, right? On the third week of January, we began saying we need to do a scenario planning session because what happened in Vietnam, the fact that it showed up in Vietnam was saying that something may come here. This is not where the government declared a pandemic. On 23rd of January, we had planning sessions on how we should plan for this to happen, to work our way through, which is why we've been able to navigate this by thinking thoughtfully. Remember, January, the rest of the country is still twiddling its thumb. We begin our planning work before the end of January. This is the quality of people that we have at Xavier. And so people would assume, oh, it has to be at Harvard at one of the Ivy Leagues or that very nice school in Morningside Heights, right? It was happening at Xavier. The fact that we're able to put behaviors and teach our people about the right behaviors was the reason why we were able to keep our positivity rate somewhere around 1.5%, no higher. We had no drugs at the time. There was no magic.
That's impressive. I mean, and that just goes to show you, like, HBCUs are essentially on a cutting edge. You saw it coming. You responded appropriately, and were able to keep your cases low. That way, you could keep the outbreak under control, whereas the rest of the country was going through a horrible outbreak. And so, I just goes to show you that HBCUs are aware. And they're very, very smart people who come from these schools. So obviously what you see right there with Dr. Vera explaining their response to the coronavirus just goes to show you just how on their game they really are down at Xavier, but and at other HBCUs. So
and I'd say it's true. In the HBCU community, the handling of the pandemic in most instances was exemplary. People actually took the steps they needed to and did what they needed to do. And there was none of the wishful thinking that many other institutions in this country, not just academic institutions, went through.
That's very true. That's very true. So that's going to do it for our second segment. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about funding and also diversity in HBCUs. So stick with us. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Dear Xavierites and friends, I pray that you and your family are safe and well as we live out the COVID-19 emergency. Yes, we are feeling anxiety and uncertainty as the situation evolves. Yet we remain committed to one another and to our shared purpose. In the footsteps of Mother Catherine, we at Xavier continue to advance our mission and to assure our students of the education they deserve. The unprecedented times call for unprecedented philanthropy in support of the mission-critical work to meet the needs of Xavier students, of Xavier faculty, of the Xavier community. I invite you all to join with us to help our students through the Love Fund during Give Love Xavier Day on April 28th. This emergency fund meets current needs associated with the university's response to the novel coronavirus, especially by assisting students impacted throughout the crisis. Let's be there for one another.
All right, viewers, so welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with Dr. Reynolds Verrett, who is the 6th president of Xavier University of Louisiana. And so we've talked about, some of the perception of HBCUs. We talked a little bit about the history and the value of HBCUs, but now we want to kind of shift to looking at funding and diversity. And first, we want to talk a little bit about funding because we know for a lot of HBCUs, fundraising is the name of the game. And so you have to be able to fundraise appropriately. And we know whether you're public or private, there are struggles and challenges that come with having consistent funding. And so we know Xavier has a fairly large endowment of, almost, I think it's here, $178 million. And so we've talked to other HBCUs who've been able to get, some of their largest donations now in the wake of the social justice protests from last year. And even, there's been money from Congress to help with the CARES Act. But our question, Dr. Verde, is just, we know the HBCUs are have always been in this catch-up mode. Dr. Robinson at FAMU said they're really in a catch-up mode. Yes, the money they're getting now is nice, but they still need continued support to be able to modernize campuses and keep up. And so we just wanted to, get your take as far as, what is Xavier doing, to try to adjust to the pandemic, but also keep their fundraising numbers, steady? And what are you kind of looking towards as far as new ways to try to get donors or alumni to give back to the school?
Well, we know that the wealth differential between African-American families and the average white family in this country is, it depends on how one calculates, anywhere from 6 to 10 to 1. It's a large wealth differential. So, and generally the capacity of most African-American families or individuals is much lower. And that impacts the fundraising, the fundraising and donation capacity of the communities that we normally draw from. But we also know that there are many individuals who are not necessarily African Americans who do become friends of our institutions because they see the remarkable work that we're doing here. Part of that comes back to some of the work that you talked about earlier about the reputational work that we have to do, because we can be lulled by an assumption that they must know about us. But really, they is just people close to us. Even if the graduate schools, the medical schools that draw our students, they know about us, but the larger community, the larger population doesn't know about us. So we have to be very intentional to tell our story. And in that intentionality, what it does do, it does bring us to the attention of people who actually do want to do transformative work. And one of the things that they realize is that institutions like ourselves, that a contribution here can not only be transformative, but has an incredible return on investment that they would not do for a similar contribution at another institution. So part of the moment that we are in because of the pandemic and also social justice question America has been asking in the last, is that some people are noticing us. But I think that's what we have to do is sustain that. And sustain that by real accomplishments and also real conversation with donors who have capacity, both commercial and also both corporate and individuals as well. That's important. The other piece is also just look at the diversity of donations we need. For example, the fact that we are educating students in many STEM fields, the ability to draw grants to support the research, which becomes the venue where students actually practice being STEM or being scientists or engineers or whatever. The same with our musicians practice by playing music and doing like that. Playing in the laboratory is the equivalent. That funding, we have to be the capacity to actually be competitive in agencies like NIH, NSF, NASA, for the funding that creates laboratories where our students can come and become junior colleagues and apprentices. That's important. So diversifying our fundraising is very important, and being able to actually make sure our message reaches the ears of people who actually do want America to move forward as one country and drawing the talent of all the people that it has. That's important. The challenge, I think, is real because I remember our students are, for example, the majority of our students in all HBCUs that I'm aware of, the majority of students are Pell eligible. At Xavier in the mid-60s right now, which means that they are in the lowest, lowest socioeconomic groups, their families are in the lowest socioeconomic groups in this country. That means they have great challenges, and therefore what we need is not just merit-based scholarships, we also need need-based funding to fill the gap, because the gap that may be minimal to a well-heeled family, let's say a few $1,000s to a family that is earning maybe 100 plus, right? The daughter or son will go to college. But for a family that is earning in the 20s, that may be a question of whether that bright daughter or son ever makes it to college. So we need the resource to meet that need and meet that gap. Because one of the things that we do know, and I've been chair of departments, I've been provost at another HBCU, and I'm president at Xavier. One of the things that we do know at many of these institutions that I've been at, that one of the more important causes of attrition, students leaving, is not because students not progressing academically. It's financial. Financial, not just because I can't pay the tuition, right? But minor calamities in the family. That lost his job. With help. Those things that we need to be able to fill that gap, because what you have is this bright young woman or man, right? Want to get them to that finish line where they can really play a role in transforming that family and the neighborhood and the larger community. So those funds to really help to make us affordable, it will be the big challenge that we have to meet for the next decade or so.
You know, that's an interesting perspective, especially when you think about the fact of, like you was talking about, the pool of money is coming from minority groups when you're talking about HBCUs who are, already behind a wealth gap, compared to, white Americans and things like that. So that's a really, really great perspective, and how HBCUs really have to diversify their funding portfolio, but also diversify maybe their enrollment, because we know that, like you said, a lot of HBCUs generally going to be 60 above with African Americans, but we've been seeing pushes for them to diversify their enrollments. One of the other things that I've been thinking about is maybe there's time to almost diversify or maybe add a new addition to the mission. And you all at Xavier are already doing that, because we see an interesting partnership between Xavier and the New Orleans Public Schools, where you've put together a partnership and a program that's resulted in more than 250 new teachers for New Orleans schools. And this initiative was designed to recruit, prepare, and develop teachers who are going to be culturally competent teachers from diverse backgrounds, which is something that's so valuable and something that we need throughout the entire country. So, Dr. Barrett, our question here, first off, you can just tell us a little bit about the efficacy of that partnership with New Orleans Public Schools. And more importantly, how do we get this to be more of a national push to, maybe get other HBCUs in on this to develop better culturally competent educators on a national basis?
Well, the vast majority of HBCUs are in the Southeast, with the exception of before Central State or even Cheney and Lincoln. The majority are in what I would call the former Confederacy. Also in part of the country with the large African-American populations. All HBCUs, we are in the middle of that density of the African diaspora to the Americas. We have also partnerships with our local school systems, our local school districts. Every HBCU needs to have a partnership, not just to produce teachers, but also to improve the quality of education in those public school systems for everyone. Because not only are we have the opportunity, we have the location, and I think there is a lot of desire. That means what's happening in the partnership that we have here, we're seeing that access to great teachers. And all of us are here because not that all of our teachers were great, but we've all had 1, 2, or 3 great teachers. And if you just sit back in your mind, you'll remember who that was. And you'll still remember something that he or she said. Those teachers actually are miraculous. And you think about great buildings, beautiful buildings, yes, but all that. But fundamentally, even in a bad building, a great teacher can do more. Just the way it is. But it's not just teachers. We have other partnerships that are, if I speak about our external mission, the schools are important. What we do in our summer programs for young students, we do in science, in data science, even in creative writing. Those summer programs are an important way of helping students understand the pathway to college. And the majority, I can't say them, but at least half of the students do not go to Xavier. They go to other colleges, which is also, that is our mission. They're going to college. That's important. And on the diversity part, you think about that diversity that we have is diversity in many aspects. Xavier was probably the first college in this country, first Catholic college in this country where men and women actually sat in classes together. For a good 30 years, we were the only one. So, but that's one beginning, but also on the other side is that we have at Xavier many of the descendants of the Vietnamese boat people who came and settled in the Southeast. They come to Xavier. And what happens is that I'm speaking of something that's another part. When I spoke about that we are repositories of the legacy and wisdom of the descendants of slaves in the Americas, which is something that actually contributes to making America and pushes America to become the nation that it needs to be, and contributes a lot to America. Not just our histories and our stories, but the way of thinking, the way of doing community is important. And other students who come to HBCUs, right? They learn from us. And I use the example of another school that I consider that has a parallel history. There's a school in a university in Massachusetts called Brandeis University. You may have heard of it. Brandeis was founded by the Jewish community at the time when Jews, especially Jewish immigrants, could not go into the Ivy League in the lower school. They were not welcome. So Brandeis was a school that was predominantly Jewish. But what happens in Brandeis over time? Brandeis is probably not predominantly Jewish, but it's still a Jewish institution steeped in Jewish culture. And students come there. And I still remember a story once when I was visiting Brandeis. And I confess the reason I was visiting is because I was dating a young woman who was a graduate student at Brandeis at the time, it's a long time ago. And I met a young man who was coming to visit, who was coming to as a graduate student, wearing a Mao jacket. This is the time when people still wore Mao jackets in China. He was coming to Brandeis, and I sat with him, and I was speaking to him, and I asked him, "What are you coming to study?" He said, "I'm coming here to do my doctoral work in English literature." I said, "That's interesting." He said, "What do you think you're going to do a dissertation on?" And he says, "I'm here to write a dissertation on the works of James Baldwin." And you see, the reason it stays with me is I say that here you are, predominantly Jewish institution, young man wearing a Mao jacket, writing about James Baldwin. That's what university is supposed to do. He said, "I've been reading Baldwin since I was a young man in China." I remember the advice I gave him, I hope he took it. I said, "You need to write a letter to James Baldwin, tell him who you are. I'm sure he'd buy you a drink." And I know he would. You would have. Baldwin's still alive. But I'm saying that Brandeis still lives and communicates the Jewish culture, the Centers of Jewish Studies and things like that. Students who come to Brandeis who are not Jewish learn about that heritage. Students who come here who are not African Americans, who are not descendants of slaves, right? Learn about a certain experience and a body of experience. They learn about our music, our culture, our food, all the things that are important about that, but also our commitment to justice and why. And sometimes they are the strongest advocates for our mission because they learn here. So in other words, our work is, if I might take a more religious bent, we have an evangelical mission in the sense of evangelical spreading of good news to the rest of the nation. And sometimes there's a saying by Francis of Assisi where he told his followers to preach all the time. I just want to make sure, no, that's not right. Francis of Assisi told his followers that they should preach. They should be preaching all the time. And he said, and when necessary, use words. In other words, your example, what you're doing at Xavier is what you want to show the country. And because what we know at Xavier, because of what we do, I think we pose an important question to the nation. We say, how come you're not doing this? You're bigger, you're rich, how come you're not doing this? And I would hope that someone would compete with us and actually show us and become our equal. Mm-hmm. That would mean that we've all arrived.
No, I really like that message there, and it's interesting to hear, kind of, from your lens down at Xavier, what you all are focused on, what you're trying to do, but also the diversity of just the student body and the thinking, and just, it's interesting to hear how you are, like you were saying at the end, you're educating folks who come to the school and letting them know the African American experience and what we've gone through, and then they go off and they take that with them. Like you said, and sometimes they become our biggest advocates right there next to us, trying to push for, justice. And that's really interesting to hear in the time that we're in this country, where we're having these conversations about race. And it seems that folks, at least right now, are more interested in trying to understand the African American experience. And so you can go to an HBCU as a person who's not Black and get and at least have a better understanding of our history and what we've contributed.
And you would be welcome and you would learn. And you'd be welcome and you would learn.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that goes back to the fact that most people recognize that HBCUs were established to educate, the Black communities, but all HBCUs had the intent and establishment for all races. It wasn't that you had to be Black to come
We
to us.
never bought into Jim Crow.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. So that's the message right there that we're gonna leave with our break here and take to our final message. Remember, viewers, we're gonna always end with our final message here as a way to send this episode in a great big old bow. So stick with us. We're gonna take our last little break with Dr. Barrett here, and we'll be right back. All right, viewers, this has been a great conversation. This HBCU awareness series has been awesome. We've been, Devin and I are very thrilled to put it together for you. Today, remember, we've been joined by Dr. Reynolds Barrett, the 6th president of Xavier University in Louisiana. Dr. Barrett, we always like to do a final message for our viewers and our listeners, just to make sure we can send the episode off to them. And to set the stage for your final message, one of the things that we know is that, HBCUs have done so much for the Black community, American society, and abroad. Whether y'all have been on the front lines or behind the scenes, since your inception, each institution has worked diligently to advance ideas of justice, equality, opportunity, even duty. We know that Xavier University of Louisiana has been part of this. I mean, going back to the mission, which we've talked about, that mission about building a more just and humane society, led by students who then go on to become proactive citizens with an emphasis on leadership and service in a global society. That's the kind of mission that we really need in every neighborhood. So, Dr. Barrett, with a way to inspire the Black community and all those who are watching and listening, leave us with the message that shows why that mission of Xavier should be instilled within the entire Black community so that we can begin to empower our own neighborhoods and rebuild ourselves toward generational wealth and prosperity.
Well, let me just begin by saying that this America, this United States, was built and grew by the ingenuity of many people, some of them who came from abroad. And in there, the ingenuity of Black people was key to building America, even when we were still slaves. People forget that the first immunization, the first vaccination in this country was because of a slave, Onesimus was actually a slave to Carlton Mathis, who showed them how to vaccinate against smallpox. We think of the Jenner vaccine, was actually an improvisation on what Onesimus showed them in Boston. We've been there before. Many of the engines that of our industrial revolution, there were slaves who divided them. The metal workers who came from West Africa, their ingenuity came with them as well. You can see it in many of our buildings and many of our sculptures around the book, and that go back to that period. But likewise, that notion of service and building the community in America has always been there with us. And I want to actually bring something else that I think everyone needs to understand, that to invest in our institutions is not just investing for the betterment of just Black people. It is necessary for the nation, the same way these young people go off to build the nation, the community. Understand that in our institution is talent. Almost 20 years ago, in 2000, a report came out from ETS looking at just the workforce in STEM, whether it was chemistry, biology, physics, computer science, those fields, engineering. And the shortage of manpower that would be available 10 years, they were looking 10 years ahead. And in that report by ATS called Meeting the Needs, one of the things they say is that the United States would not be able to meet its workforce in these important STEM fields unless it educated its Black and brown children, because the United States was becoming majority minority. So in other words, it's almost like going into combat into the Olympic Games, right? With only a fraction of your population, or with one hand tied behind your back and maybe one leg tied behind your back as well. Not a happy situation. So what I'm saying is that the fact that we educate these scientists, these engineers, creative people who drive our creative industry, like Chadwick Boseman, and that's a major engine of prosperity for this nation. Writers, lawyers, people who contribute to all the part of the country, many of these people are Black and brown. And our schools educate them, and they actually make this country possible. Understanding, for example, that if the United States, this is not, I'm not exaggerating, I'm saying, if the United States hopes to remain a world power, a military, economic, all the perspectives that you would want to be a power in the world, right? You have to educate your talent. And that talent is in the second, third, or fourth grade right now. That's your gold. If you want to bury that gold, you can bury that gold, or you can educate that gold, let it flower. Other countries, there was a time when we could count on immigrants from countries like China or India coming to study, even out of best graduate schools, and remaining here. Now, those countries are developing. They want to repatriate their brains. You cannot blame them. So if you don't educate your own, you want to be a backwater, that's what will happen. And we've been in the second grade class before. If you've never been to second, you should walk into a second grade class before recess or after recess, and you'll see these freaky, bright boys and girls. That's what America is going to depend upon. The best pediatric neurosurgeon of his generation, right? Was Carson, when Carson was a surgeon. You know how many other people like Ben Carson we chose not to educate? This young woman at the NIH was involved in seeding the first mRNA vaccines. There are others like that. The museum right here at the World War II Museum has done exhibitions on Charles Drew. Has anyone audited how many lives of American soldiers were saved in World War II because of the technology of freezing blood plasma and being able to ship it abroad? And the thing I'm thinking that there are many books, inventions, we don't have the picture of who did it, right? But Black folks were there. And what we know is that in this moment in time, if we want to be able to compete and educate our own and compete with our own, you're going to have to educate some people who look like you and me. And educate them very well. HBCUs are doing that. And therefore, in that respect, we're not just doing something for some people, we're doing it for the country. And so when you are investing in our HBCUs, you're investing in the Black community, you're also investing in the nation. And that's the future that we want to happen for this country. Remember, as Alma Lewis, who was the theater promoter and things like that in Massachusetts once said, she was saying, she would often refer to as American as an ongoing project, an unfinished project. This project of justice is unfinished. We stumble and fall. But this is where we're going. And as Martin would say, the arc of justice is bending. The arc is bending towards justice. We'll get there, but it's not, and we'll get there by counting every one of those bright boys and girls in the second grade. And we'll see them as our children, their children, or their children.
That's a very, very powerful message there. That was incredible. I was hanging on, to every word, and I appreciate you just kind of, laying it out there and getting people to understand the contributions, of African Americans and why it's so important to invest not only in HBCUs but in Black communities, because there is incredibly talented, smart folks out there who are just not being, educated and groomed to really contribute to the country. And so it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot when we, defund, Black schools and defund HBCUs.
It's like flushing money away.
Yeah, I mean, it's so
flushing genius away. You're flushing genius away.
Exactly. I mean, that one quote you said. I mean, when you invest in HBCU, you're investing in America. I mean, that we need to put that on a T-shirt or a hat or something and start selling that, because that is powerful. I mean, that is truly what it's about. When you're investing in Xavier's and Hamptons and Howard, you're building a better America, because, as you said, America is being built by Black and brown folks, and a lot of Black and brown folks are going to these institutions, and a lot of these Black and brown folks at these institutions are going on to become vice president of the United States and things. So we've got to make sure that all institutions like our HBCUs are top tier. They're given the accreditation, they're given the resources that they need, because like you said, they're going to be producing top talent that the world needs, not just the Black community, but the world as a whole needs. So yeah, that was, like I said, we need to put that on a shirt, Devin, and start marking that. Investing in HBCUs is investing in America, because that's what it's all about. And that's almost like a theme for this HBCU series, Dr. Baird. You didn't know about it, but you kind of gave us a new little theme there, because that's a very powerful sentence when you sum it all up like that. Devin, I don't know, any last thoughts for you?
No, I mean, I appreciate everything you said, Dr. Verrett, and you've been spot on from the very, very beginning and in diagnosing, the issues, but also trying to give people a look forward and why we need to take care of our HBCUs, and why people, need to not tell all the bad stories about HBCUs, but be willing to tell the good stories of the amazing research and physicians and doctors and lawyers that you all are producing. And they're going on to do incredible things for the country, because that's a story that really needs to be told. And we hear it all the time. The story of HBCUs is just not being told enough. And so we appreciate you coming on our show to be able to tell Xavier's story of what you all are doing down there, what you're focused on, and how you're looking ahead to the next decade. So I just appreciate you coming on and giving us, your perspective from Xavier.
And I thank you, because you're telling our story and getting our story to people who never heard it. And this is important work that you're doing. The country needs to hear from you. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's what we're trying to, put this together for, put it out so that people will know. And viewers, remember, we've been joined today by Dr. Reynold Verrett, who's the 6th president of Xavier University in Louisiana. Great institution, only Catholic HBCU in our nation. Be sure to check them out, because they are really preparing students for global excellence. And if you want to be a part of that, you need to have them on your radar. So make sure that you check them out. Stick with us, viewers and listeners. We're going to take one more break. And as always, Devin and I are going to come back and wrap up our episode. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome back. So as always, we like to end the podcast with a look forward to what is upcoming for the rest of this series and for the podcast. And so for the month of March, we've been recognizing HBCUs because it is HBCU Awareness Month. And that's why we did come up with the idea to do an awareness series. And so each week we've been releasing a conversation with the leader at an HBCU on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if you haven't already, if this is your first time watching this series after listening to Dr. Verrett, we do urge you to go back and listen to some of our conversations with leaders at FAMU, Howard, Grambling, Tuskegee, Fisk, Claflin, and Hampton University. An impressive lineup that we have. And so upcoming, though, our series is coming to an end, unfortunately. We've thoroughly enjoyed bringing you these conversations, but our very last episode will feature Dr. Thomas Hudson from Jackson State University. And so we're going to dig into them and kind of see what they're doing up at Jackson State. So tune in. That'll be next week, March 30th at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. You can watch that on Facebook and YouTube, just like you watched just Dr. Verrett. And so as always, too, we will be back with you on Saturday, March 27th, to bring you our weekly roundup. And that's where we bring you the news at 7:30 p.m. Central Time on Facebook and YouTube. And that's where we kind of bring you the news in a different way. We try to do it unbiased, but also funny, engaging, and it's the breaking news of the week, but also some news you may not have heard about. So look for that coming out on Saturday. And also, too, we do appreciate your support listening, but we also ask for your support monetarily. And so we do have a way for you to give to us, whether it's a few dollars or $100. And so, Adrian, you can kind of explain to the viewers there how they can get back to us.
Yeah, I was laughing at that because this reminds me of being in church, or how, we used to say from the pulpit, it's nice to show up, but when it's offering time, we need you to give. So you were just awesome that you're showing up to watch us and listen to us, but it's offering time. So it'd be great to be able to get some of those donations. And what I always tell people, the easy part is going to our website, blackagendapod.com and clicking the donate button. That's the easy stuff. But the good stuff is why you should donate. I mean, the Black Agenda Podcast, our mission is really about engaging with leaders to talk about issues within minority communities, but really about how they slow down societal progress. And from doing that, we want to really create an organization, create a mission, a message that can really go to better society. And that does take money because, in America, you can have great ideas, but you do have to have dollars behind those ideas to get them off the ground. We always tell people, start with $1 a month. It's an easy contribution. Like I said, go to our website, start there, start small, grow from there, and you're really going to help to expand our mission. The other thing that you will help us with is our Charity of the Month. Remember, we're honoring the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. It would be awesome if you donate and we could give a donation in honor of the Black Agenda Podcast and our fans to recognize the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which is an institution that's really trying to put a lot of students in HBCUs. I mean, their mission is to ensure student success by promoting educational excellence and preparing the next generation of workforce talent through leadership development. So a really great mission, just like the Black Agenda Podcast. So you donate to them, you donate to us, just like HBCUs. We can make the world a better place.
Absolutely. You almost sound like Dr. Verrett for a little bit. But again, we appreciate you sticking with us. We had an amazing interview with Dr. Reynold Verrett from Xavier University of Louisiana, and a great interview there. If you can't, go back and listen to it tonight, go back and listen to it tomorrow, share it with everybody. The last thing we like to tell everybody is to find us on social media, and that would be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is @BlackAgendaPod, and that's @BlackAgendaPod. So you can just put that in there. Go follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, like, share, everything. We're trying to get our engagement up. We want this to get in front of as many people as possible, not only to support us, but to support Xavier University of Louisiana. We're trying to give them some exposure too. So double support there. So again, we appreciate you. We definitely want to thank Xavier University of Louisiana for making Dr. Verrett available to us. We enjoyed the conversation with him, and he left us with some good nuggets, definitely.
And hey, Devin, before we end, I just wanted to mention those nuggets. I just wanted to make sure we go back to that quote he said was, when you're investing in HBCUs, you're investing in America. I just wanted to make sure we get that out, one last time, because now that's a powerful statement that you'll probably see us putting on a T-shirt whenever we do this series in 2022. So be on the lookout for that. But that was a powerful statement I wanted to make sure we end with. When you're investing in HBCUs, you're investing in America.
Very, very true. That's a great quote. So don't be surprised if you see that on a T-shirt come 2022 or 2021. We'll see. But again, we thank you for staying with us. We thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.